You're not going to believe this. What happened on national television didn't just shake the political scene, it cracked it open. Karoline Leavitt, just 27, the youngest White House spokesperson in U.S. history, didn't come to play nice. She came with fire in her eyes and ammunition in her briefcase. And her target? None other than Barack Obama, the man once hailed as the voice of hope, the cool commander-in-chief. Only this time, the gloves were off. Before we plunge into the chaos, drop a comment, where are you tuning in from? And hit subscribe, because stories like this don't just come and go. They erupt. Inside the studio of American Pulse, the air was electric. Lights blazed like stage lightning. The audience sat on edge, restless and wide-eyed. Phones were already recording. The atmosphere wasn't just tense, it was volatile. Two figures. One stage. A clash decades in the making. Karoline, sharp suit, sharper gaze. Every inch of her screamed precision. Control. Fury wrapped in elegance. Obama, composed as ever. Hands folded, face unreadable. But his eyes scanning, measuring, waiting. Then came the host, stepping into the spotlight like a man announcing a prize fight. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steady and resonant. Tonight's not just another political discussion. A pause, a deep breath. This is confrontation. Real, unfiltered. A search for truth in a world drowning in spin. The crowd? Silent. You could hear a shoe scuff from the back row. Then, without missing a beat, the host dove in. Only 30% of Americans believe the media is telling them the truth. In this age of distrust, one question haunts us. Is the press serving the people or serving an agenda? He turned to Karoline, motioning with open palms. You've been one of the most outspoken voices accusing the media of partisanship. So tell us, what role did President Obama play in shaping that machine? Karoline didn't hesitate. Not even a blink. Gladly, she said, her voice cool and razor-sharp. Because what I have to say matters. Not just to this room. To the country. She leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with the former president. In 2012, and again in 2016, Mr. Obama didn't just benefit from media bias, he fueled it. Directed it. Weaponized it to silence opposition and destroy reputations. The words hit the crowd like a drumbeat, strong, steady, undeniable. He called himself a unifier, she went on, each word cutting deeper. But in the shadows, he coordinated with media giants. And the result? A flood of hit pieces, first against William, then Trump. Not journalism. Strategy. Behind her, the screen lit up, headlines, dates, a timeline pulsing with political bloodshed. These weren't accidents. They were planned. The room erupted, half applause, half outrage. Shouts. Cheers. Boos. The kind of noise you only get when something real is happening. The host stepped in quickly, like a conductor regaining control of a symphony on the verge of chaos. President Obama, he said, turning calmly, you're being accused of manipulating the media to serve political ends. Karoline says you didn't just respond to coverage, you helped create it. Your response. Obama leaned in. Not flustered, but focused. Let me be clear, he said, voice smooth, but firm as steel. What Karoline is suggesting is simply false. The press is independent. I've always respected that independence. These theories? They're fiction. Cheers erupted from a section of the audience. A loud yes rose from the back. But Karoline didn't so much as blink. Independent, she said coldly. Then explain this. She stood. Slowly, deliberately. And held up a stack of papers, glinting under the lights. These are logs of your private meetings with media executives, conveniently timed just before waves of negative stories broke against your opponents. She stepped toward the center of the stage, eyes burning. And here, she gestured to the screen, an internal email. One of your advisors wrote, we pushed the narrative on William's business record. The screen behind her flared to life. The words lit up like a flare in the dark. The studio fell dead silent. One heartbeat, then another. Then the host's voice, hushed but intense, rolled over the audience. Tonight, he said, we may be watching more than a political clash. We may be witnessing the unveiling of something far deeper. Something systemic. Host. Karoline, you've just struck a nerve. You brought up transparency, something only 16% of Americans say the media handles fairly, according to Pew. Now, Mr. Obama, Karoline here just unveiled internal emails suggesting you manipulated the media, that you didn't just use it, you weaponized it. How do you respond? Obama, Karoline, these so-called documents fake. I never ordered the media to go after anyone. The press operates on facts. I respected their independence. Always have. Karoline, the truth. Then tell them, why did every hit piece drop just when it helped your narrative? Karoline, this memo? Your team's. It shows a deliberate campaign to leak dirt. Not reporting, Mr. Obama. Tactical sabotage. You didn't respect the press. You turned it into your mouthpiece. Host. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer just a media critique. It's a full-blown cross-examination. And with public trust in journalism at 34%, according to Gallup, the stakes couldn't be higher. And the timing crucial. As tensions boil in the Middle East, drones, sanctions, shadow wars, the world watches America. So we ask, not just what was done, but what legacy was left behind. Karoline, your views on global leadership are no secret. Now, assess the Iran nuclear deal, one of President Obama's most defining, yet divisive, foreign policy moments. Karoline. Thank you. You call it a victory. I call it a gamble. A legacy play that sacrificed safety for headlines. You handed Iran a lifeline. You funded extremists. You jeopardized every ally in the region. Karoline. This is not peace. It's a payout. And it made the world more dangerous. Host. Karoline, calling this deal a concession is a charge that carries real weight, especially with Israel voicing concern. Mr. Obama, your turn. Is this deal security or surrender? Obama, let's be clear. This deal prevented a nuclear Iran. It was verified, supported, internationally acknowledged. Karoline's chart? Out of context. Iran's weapons program was stopped, not strengthened. Karoline. A diplomatic win? Then why did $1.7 billion in cash get flown to Iran just days after the deal? And why this? Karoline. You didn't block a threat. You bankrolled it. You didn't stop the enemy. You armed them. Host. Karoline, you've now framed this as financing terrorism with internal emails to back it up. Mr. Obama, this isn't just foreign policy anymore. This is character, legacy, and accountability. Obama gave a slight shake of his head, his face set with gravity, his gaze revealing an unwavering resolve. His tone sliced through the air cool, measured, yet imbued with undeniable weight, as though to banish all confusion. Karoline, labeling this transaction as supporting terrorism, is a gross mischaracterization, he said, carefully enunciating each word. It was a resolution to long-standing financial entanglements, conducted openly and fully within the legal architecture of a multinational accord. The nuclear agreement with Tehran garnered substantial endorsement from the global community, including the Security Council. I categorically reject any assertion that it compromised international safety. His words gained momentum, growing into a declaration of firm conviction. We must approach this issue with a wider lens, not driven by sentiment or bias. This was a calculated effort to avert nuclear conflict, to maintain stability across regions, and to uphold the fabric of global peace. The audience remained hushed, hanging on Obama's every syllable, while Karoline stood her ground, fire smoldering in her eyes, awaiting her turn with bated breath. Behind them, the screen cast an uneasy light, illuminating the sharpened contrast between two master tacticians, two divergent worldviews. Karoline's lips curled into a composed smile, her eyes locked on Obama. "Legitimate," she echoed, her voice cutting through the room like a flash of lightning, dismantling the assertion of transparency. "Then clarify why Tehran breached the agreement, intensifying uranium enrichment mere months after your departure." With a deft touch, she activated the screen, which now displayed a headline, "Agreement breached. Tehran surpasses uranium thresholds, 2019. "This document makes it clear your accord faltered," she declared, her voice a resounding verdict, echoing like a gavel in a court of law, countering Obama's claim of global endorsement. "You didn't secure peace. You left behind a ticking threat to both Tel Aviv and the United States." The camera panned slowly to the report. The studio remained a capsule of silence, the weight of her argument settling heavily over the room. Outside the studio, digital fires raged. On X, formerly Twitter, a staunch nationalist account proclaimed, "Karoline dismantled Obama. That nuclear pact was a train wreck." Simultaneously, Jessica Allen's, a high-profile conservative voice, shared an image of Karoline brandishing leaked documents. "She's a sentinel of truth." Progressive voices swiftly retaliated. One influential poster wrote, "Karoline is twisting facts. That deal curbed the nuclear race." Beneath the post, a cascade of replies flooded in. "She needs to authenticate that email." This is political theater. News outlets leapt into the fray. The New York Sentinel described Karoline as a polarizing force, pushing the boundaries of political confrontation, while a viral op-ed hailed her as a beacon piercing the fog of partisan media. Back in the studio, tension hung in the air like an overdrawn string. The moderator, poised and commanding, deftly took the reins of the conversation, steering the discussion toward the next theme. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, his tone unwavering yet measured. "As foreign policy continues to dominate headlines, another battlefront demands equal urgency, one that touches the lives of every household in this country: healthcare." He paused briefly, letting his eyes drift across the studio, making deliberate contact with the crowd, as though urging each soul to consider the gravity of what he was about to say. A recent study from the Dominion Health Institute reveals that nearly half of the population remains deeply anxious about rising prescription prices and the growing challenge of affording medical care. This casts a long shadow over the healthcare legacy of the Obama years, particularly the Affordable Care Act. He pivoted toward Karoline, his tone still polished and neutral, but laced with a hint of provocation, laying down a path for her response. "Karoline, you've been a consistent critic of the previous administration's economic direction, especially its hands-on approach to market dynamics. With that in mind, how do you assess President Obama's role in crafting and executing the ACA? Has it truly fulfilled the promises made to the American people?" The room fell into a contemplative silence, as if collectively holding its breath, awaiting not just another political jab, but a decisive statement capable of altering the perception of a generation-defining policy. Karoline straightened, her voice emerging with quiet precision, sharp as a finely honed blade. "Thank you. Mr. Obama champions the Affordable Care Act as a cornerstone of progress. But I'm here to pull back the curtain on what I believe is a legacy built on false promises, one that financially strained American families for the sake of political polish." There was a stir in the crowd, some nodding, others whispering, each interpreting her words through their own lens. She pressed forward, her cadence gaining force like a surging tide. "You told Americans they could keep their doctors, keep their coverage. But in reality, millions lost both, only to face escalating premiums." She motioned toward the screen, now displaying a stark graphic: "Health insurance premiums, a 25% rise since ACA rollout." "This is not reform," she stated flatly, her voice cutting through the tension like a whistle through fog. This is an economic weight dragging down the very people it promised to lift. The host advanced, his voice imbued with a measured gravity, the studio lights outlining his features in a halo of calm authority, his presence anchoring the debate as it intensified. Karoline, you call the Affordable Care Act an economic anchor, a claim that stirs sharp debate. Especially now, when industry reports confirm a steady climb in premium costs, disproportionately burdening middle and lower-income Americans. He turned again to Obama, his tone respectful yet exacting. President Obama, as the principal force behind the ACA, you frequently asserted that the law extended health care to millions. Yet Karoline contends that this progress has come with significant economic fallout. How do you respond to the charge that your signature achievement has, in fact, injured the very citizens it sought to protect? Obama sat composed, his hands joined on the table, his posture betraying neither tension nor fatigue. When he answered, it was in the tempered voice of a seasoned policymaker, clear, grounded, and seasoned by adversity. Thank you, Karoline. To call the Affordable Care Act a burden is more than an oversimplification. It's a misrepresentation of both intent and outcome. He paused, holding Karoline's gaze with unblinking calm. We extended healthcare access to over 20 million individuals. That's not a projection, it's an established fact. The uninsured rate fell to unprecedented lows. The figures you reference on cost lack critical context. They ignore federal subsidies, overlook the protections granted to those with pre-existing conditions, and fail to consider the spiraling medical expenses that plagued this country long before the Affordable Care Act. His voice deepened, carrying the quiet power of someone speaking not just for policy, but for people. This legislation isn't flawless, and I've never claimed it was the final word. But if we're discussing burdens, the true burden lies in abandoning millions without coverage, a cost we pay morally, economically, and as a society. Silence settled over the studio once again, but tension simmered beneath the stillness. The camera turned to Karoline, her eyes sharp as winter frost, poised for retaliation. Applause rippled briefly from Obama's supporters, but Karoline remained unshaken. 20 million insured, she repeated, her voice slicing through the room like a sudden gust. Then explain why countless Americans lost their existing plans they relied on because of the ACA's mandates. She tapped a control, and the screen lit up with a damning email. Internal memo, mitigate blowback over plan cancellations. This shows you were fully aware people would lose their coverage, she said, her tone precise, almost surgical in its delivery. You didn't fix healthcare. You hurled millions into financial disarray. A hush swept through the crowd, the silence charged with unease. The host stepped in, his voice alive with energy, threading the argument back to the broader discourse. Karoline, your charge that the ACA unleashed economic disruption echoes the financial anxieties cited in the Dominion Health Report. President Obama, you led the reform effort. But Karoline now presents evidence suggesting foreknowledge of coverage losses. How do you respond? Obama exhaled, his head shaking slightly, his tone firm and unwavering. Karoline, branding the Affordable Care Act as chaos is misleading. That email is fabricated. This law expanded access, fortified protections for the vulnerable, and is favored by a majority of the population. I categorically deny that it caused financial destruction. Karoline's lips curled into a tight smile, her gaze locked onto him. Majority support, she asked, her voice a spark flashing across the room. Then how do you justify the fact that insurance costs surged, driving American families into personal debt? Once more, she gestured to the screen. A headline flared into view, ACA fallout. Premiums rose 25% between 2010 and 2018. This report lays bare the truth, she declared, her words falling like hammers in a courtroom. The promise to cut costs was false. You didn't serve Americans. You served your legacy. The camera lingered on the report, the figures stark and inescapable. The room remained frozen, the weight of her argument hanging like storm clouds ready to break. The debate had evolved beyond policy into a symbolic clash of philosophies. The audience sat motionless, transfixed by the electric tension unfolding between Karoline Leavitt and Barack Obama. On stage, the atmosphere held steady, like the calm before a tempest. The host, his tone steady and dignified, stepped forward once more, now taking on the role of bridge builder between worldviews that could not coexist. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice deliberate and reflective. In an age when public faith in political institutions wavers, the question of influence after office looms large. Many citizens question the enduring reach of former leaders, those whose shadows may still stretch across today's political terrain. He paused, his gaze spanning the room, as if beckoning the nation to join in reckoning with the question. "Karoline," he said, his tone sharpening slightly, "you've been a vocal advocate for transparency and accountability in government." Former President Obama vowed to retreat from the political stage after his presidency. Yet his recent statements, indirect endorsements, and presumed influence in modern advocacy groups suggest otherwise. What is your assessment of his true role in this post-presidential chapter? Karoline sat upright, her voice low, honed, and ready to cut through the static. Her gaze, still fixed on Obama, did not waver. "Thank you," Karoline began, her voice poised and piercing. "President Obama once vowed to dedicate his post-presidential years to philanthropy. But I stand here to reveal how he continued to exert political influence from behind a curated veil, using nonprofit networks to quietly destabilize the Hamilton administration." A hush swept across the studio. Some audience members nodded, others whispered in restrained protest. Karoline continued, her voice gathering force, flowing like a swift and unrelenting current. He funded resistance movements aimed at President Hamilton's agenda, igniting unrest and preserving his foothold in national affairs. She raised her hand toward the screen, which now illuminated a chart. Contributions from Obama-affiliated foundations increased by 50% between 2017 and 2020. "This isn't philanthropy," she declared, her tone like a shaft of steel launched across the room. "It's a calculated design to remain in command." The host stepped in, carefully weaving her point into the ongoing discourse. "Karoline, you suggest this was a deliberate campaign to preserve influence, a growing concern as nonprofit institutions increasingly shape public narratives, prompting sharp debates about transparency. President Obama, in light of Karoline's assertion, how do you respond to the claim that you covertly financed political disruption, despite your pledge to step away from public life?" Obama sat forward, his hands steady, his voice low but confident, drawing momentum from her accusation. "Thank you, Karoline. The notion that I orchestrated politics from the shadows is simply unfounded. My post-presidential efforts have centered on education, leadership development, and civic engagement, not clandestine political warfare." The chart you referenced strips away context. "I categorically deny attempting to undermine any administration." Supportive applause rippled from one side of the audience. Karoline, however, remained motionless. "Education," she repeated coldly, latching onto his defense with surgical precision. "Then explain why your organizations funneled millions into opposition campaigns." She tapped the controller. The screen flashed with an internal message, directive, increase support to civic coalitions to sustain pressure on current policy. "This shows coordination," she said, her tone sharp as a prosecutor laying out closing arguments. "You didn't retire from politics. You engineered a machine built for disruption." A dense silence swept over the room, the implication of her words lingering like fog. The host interjected again, his voice energized, tying the moment to a broader societal concern. "Karoline, your argument that President Obama established a political network under the guise of civic action touches on a larger debate about the influence of NGOs in modern governance. President Obama, Karoline presents what she calls direct evidence of your sustained engagement in political activism. How do you respond to these latest allegations? Obama leaned forward slightly, his face firm but composed, as he directly challenged the premise. That email distorts reality. The organizations I support are dedicated to civic literacy, community empowerment, and encouraging voter participation, especially among underserved populations. They are not political weapons. He turned his gaze to Karoline, his voice resolute. I firmly reject the accusation that I'm manipulating American affairs from the wings. That's a misrepresentation of the work of thousands of people striving to uplift and unify, not divide. Karoline didn't blink. She offered a thin, calculated smile, her voice soft but edged in steel. Not manipulation, she repeated, zeroing in on his civic claim. Then explain why two whistleblowers, Robert Hupper and Elizabeth Rouse, risked their careers to reveal what you continue to deny. She clicked again, and the screen sprang to life, a rapid-fire montage of interviews. Harper's voice, emails confirm he asked to keep Iran violations hidden. Mitchell's, I reviewed the funding ledgers. The money went to anti-Hamilton initiatives. I didn't speculate, I witnessed it. Karoline turned back to the camera, her voice clear and heavy, like a judge handing down a sentence. You're not transparent. You orchestrate. You never stepped back. You still pull the strings. The room turned to stone. No applause. No whispers. Just silence thick as smoke. Those images, those voices, hovered above the stage like ghosts from a not-so-distant past. And in the charged stillness of the Republic Forum studio, the weight of the confrontation no longer felt like politics, it felt like reckoning. The host, poised at the fulcrum between two towering presences, lifted his chin and let his voice ring out, solemn, final, like the echo of a gavel closing the pages of history. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed a debate marked by intensity, conviction, and a fearless confrontation of legacy. Karoline Leavitt, a rising voice of a new generation, posed bold and unrelenting questions about power, transparency, and accountability. And former President Barack Obama stood firm in defense of the policies that helped shape this nation's course for more than a decade. He turned toward the lens, eyes steady, as though addressing every home in the nation. Whether your allegiance lies with Karoline or President Obama, the truth remains. Democracy flourishes through dialogue, when difficult questions are posed, when those in power are held to account, and when no title places anyone above inquiry. He paused briefly, then offered a respectful bow. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable night. I'm John Collins, and this is the Civic Forum, where truth never hides. The stage lights dimmed to a quiet glow as the frame widened. The audience began rising, applause swelling, neither frenzy nor frenzy's absence, but a gesture of respect for the gravity of what had unfolded. Karoline and Obama did not shake hands. Instead, they exchanged nods, measured, knowing, like two champions stepping out of the ring, each bearing their convictions like banners. Online, the storm was immediate. One user posted, Karoline dismantled the narrative. Obama stood exposed. In return, progressive voices fired back, Karoline is a flamethrower. Obama remains a pillar of progress. The media fractured along familiar lines. The Herald Tribune dubbed Karoline a disruptor-in-chief, while Liberty News praised her as a crusader for reform. In the heart of Colorado Springs, under a blazing sunset, Karoline stood before a roaring crowd at a public square rally. Waves of #TruthFirst banners rippled through the air. Energy surged through the crowd, like electricity crackling between storm clouds. Cameras flashed, drones buzzed overhead, and her image streamed to screens across the country. Clad in a navy blue suit, eyes alight with purpose, Karoline gripped the microphone. Her voice burst forth, firm and resonant, like a gust sweeping through dry leaves. My confrontation with President Obama wasn't just political theater. It was the spark of a movement, one that demands honesty from every corner of power. Thunderous cheers rose around her, the air thick with momentum. From the media to foreign policy, from healthcare to post-presidency power, I asked what millions have been longing to ask. Where does the truth begin, and where does legacy end? The crowd roared again, applause colliding like ocean breakers. She pressed forward, voice soaring like a banner in the wind. Robert Hupper, Elizabeth Rouse. They risked everything, careers, reputations, to reveal what others tried to bury. But make no mistake, the real strength behind this moment is you. Behind her, a towering screen displayed images of citizens at town halls, community circles under #TruthFirst flags, people of every background gathered in open dialogue. My legacy, she said, her voice calm now, but arrow true, is not about me. It's about building a movement that returns the power of truth to the people, from small-town streets to the marble halls of Washington. The crowd erupted. Online, posts blazed across the digital landscape. One read, "She's not just speaking truth. She's becoming it." The shockwaves of the debate rippled outward. Fact-checking organizations released fresh reviews of the Iran deal and nonprofit funding tied to former leaders. Across the country, civic groups hosted workshops titled Know Your Leaders, sparked by the resonance of Karoline's challenge. The #TruthFirst surged again on X, urging citizens to verify, to question, to demand clarity. Yet, with every surge came division. The left mobilized its defense, launching digital campaigns to uphold Obama's record, with posts declaring, "Obama led with dignity. Karoline fuels chaos." Meanwhile, conservative influencers and MAGA loyalists embraced Karoline as the movement's torchbearer, intensifying the national divide. At a private fundraising gala in Santa Fe, Obama appeared before a curated crowd. He stood calmly as questions about the debate surfaced. During a televised interview, his tone was measured, his gaze reflective. "Karoline has every right to question," he said, in a voice tempered by years in the public arena. "But her claims are incorrect. My legacy is one of service, guided by integrity. And I believe the American people will see that clearly in time." His words drew applause from the crowd. Yet, across the digital battlefield, reactions split like fault lines. Praise from progressives. Fire from the right. Back in Colorado, Karoline took the stage once more, her voice echoing into the dusk like a vow carved in stone. "Integrity," she repeated, picking up on his words with chilling precision. "Integrity is not about image. It's about truth. It's about refusing to steer from the shadows." The screen behind her flared again with the words, #TruthFirst. Americans demand transparency. This movement, she concluded, her voice rising to meet the roar of the people, is your voice. This is our future. And it will be built not on spin, not on legacy, but on truth. Karoline carried on with her address, her tone alive with fervor, anchoring lofty ideals in the soil of reality. In a time of manipulated truths, she declared, citizens from every walk of life are rising up, uncovering facts, holding their leaders to account. A wave of approval surged through the crowd as the screen behind her flickered with moments. Karoline at civic forums, people hoisting banners emblazoned with #TruthFirst. "We're not just confronting the shadows of yesterday," she continued, her cadence firm, like a seasoned advocate delivering a closing argument. "We're laying the foundation for a future defined by openness." The footage surged across the digital sphere, amassing millions of views within hours. Karoline's moment became legend. At the edge of the stage, she stood motionless for a heartbeat, surrounded by a tide of thunderous clapping. She scanned the audience, farmers, tradespeople, students, veterans, a tapestry of the nation. They hadn't come merely to listen. They had gathered to be part of something that mattered. A moment when politics stopped being a narrative dictated by elites and became a restoration of the people's rightful voice. "We don't wait for transparency," she said, her words no longer cutting, but resolute, luminous. "We make it happen." The phrase seemed suspended in the twilight, etched into the coppery sky. It reverberated online, picked up, subtitled, and shared across continents, even by those who once scoffed at politics. This was never just about Karoline Leavitt and Barack Obama. It was a collision between heritage and hunger for change, between preserving what was and daring to shape what could be. And in every living democracy, it is always the people who hold the pen to the next chapter. Online, the commentary surged like wildfire. One user wrote simply, "Karoline dominated." Obama's team couldn't dismiss it. Critics responded, "Karoline disrupts." Obama inspires. The media splintered. One network labeled her an instigator, another hailed her a visionary for reform. At a twilight rally in Riverbend, the sun painted the horizon in gold as Karoline stood beneath the open sky, thousands waving truth, first flags in a sea of color. The energy was palpable, a current running through the crowd, sparked by the confrontation at the Civic Voice Forum. Every camera lens was trained on her, every phone streaming to millions across the globe. In her navy ensemble, eyes unwavering, she gripped the mic as though anchoring the moment. Her voice surged a flood of conviction. The exchange with Obama wasn't just sparring over ideas. It had ignited a national reckoning, demanding honesty from those in power. The crowd responded with fervor, their cheers rolling like distant thunder, banners catching the wind. "I challenged everything, foreign policy deals, healthcare reform, and the power wielded beyond the presidency," she declared, each word honed and thrown like a spear of truth. The applause rose, relentless. Karoline's voice carried like a storm front sweeping across the plains. Journalist Robert Hupper and former aide Elizabeth Rouse risked everything to shed light where it was darkest. "But the true strength," she said, her voice catching, "lies with you, the American people." Behind her, the screen came alive again, workshops in small towns, citizens engaged in debate, all beneath the Truth First emblem. "My legacy," she added, her tone piercing and pure, "is not a title. It's a movement that arms you with truth." From the villages of New Albion to the corridors of the Capitol, the crowd surged with renewed energy. And online, a message flashed across timelines: Karoline is the torchbearer of truth. The aftershocks of the debate continued to roll. Nonpartisan fact-checkers released updated investigations into the foreign accords and the influence wielded by ex-presidents. Grassroots groups launched new transparency initiatives. Across X, the hashtag #TruthFirst campaign mushroomed, urging citizens to question, to verify, to demand integrity. But with momentum came deeper divides. Progressive voices rallied behind Obama, claiming he remained a pillar of vision. "Karoline divides," read one post. In contrast, populist factions doubled down on Karoline, widening the ideological fault lines. At a quiet benefit in Greenmont, Obama made a rare appearance. His voice was even, his expression contemplative, as he sat down for an interview, silent, perhaps, but watching the tide shift. Karoline pressed forward with her address, her voice luminous with energy, anchoring vision in lived experience. In a time clouded by disinformation, she declared, "Citizens across the nation are rising, seeking facts, questioning those in power." A thunderous cheer rose from the crowd as the backdrop lit up with vibrant images. Karoline at community forums, citizens raising placards marked #TruthFirst. "We're not merely confronting the ghosts of yesterday," she said, her voice precise and resolute, reminiscent of a courtroom advocate issuing a final judgment. "We are crafting a future steeped in honesty." The segment took flight online, going viral within hours. It garnered millions of views, solidifying Karoline's emerging legend. She paused at the edge of the stage, surrounded by a storm of applause. Before her stood a vast cross-section of the nation: farmers, tradesmen, college students, retired service members. They hadn't come simply to listen. They had come to bear witness. This was the moment when governance ceased to belong to the insulated few and returned to its rightful stewards, The people. We don't wait for honesty, she declared, her voice no longer honed like a blade, but full and rallying like a hymn. We build it. Her words lingered in the dusk, etched in the sky like scripture. They echoed across timelines, translated into dozens of languages, and reposted by voices once silent or apathetic. The saga of Karoline Leavitt and Barack Obama was never about victory or defeat. It was a reckoning between inheritance and ambition, a confrontation between the guardians of legacy and the architects of what's next. In a true democracy, after all, the next verse belongs not to the powerful, but to the people. Online discourse raged. One viral post simply read, "Karoline dominated." Obama's team could offer little refute. From the left came rebuttals. She's a firebrand. He's a pillar. Newsrooms fractured along predictable lines. One outlet labeled her a provocateur, another dubbed her the vanguard of reform. At a massive rally in Clearwater Plains, the sky burned crimson as Karoline stood beneath the setting sun, thousands waving Truth First banners. The air crackled with momentum, the tremor of something newly awakened, still spreading from their seismic exchange at the People's Platform debate. Every camera lens drank in the moment. Streams reached homes and devices across the country. Dressed in midnight blue, her eyes fierce and steady, Karoline seized the microphone. Her voice surged outward, a rush of conviction impossible to ignore. Her duel with Mr. Obama was more than rhetoric, it was the catalyst for a movement demanding clarity from those once deemed untouchable. The crowd roared, their voices rising in crescendo. Banners danced in the wind. I challenged it all, from the Iran deal to the Affordable Care Act to the quiet dealings after the presidency, she said, each word cutting clean as a scalpel. Not for spectacle, but to restore trust. The applause crashed back like surf against a rocky shore. And still she surged ahead, her voice like wind through the trees, bold, unrelenting. It wasn't just Harper and Mitchell, she cried, referencing the journalist and former aide who risked careers to bring forward buried truths. It's you. You're the fire. You're the reckoning. The screen behind her glowed once more. Neighborhood workshops, town halls, citizens deep in conversation, all beneath the Truth First standard. My legacy, she declared, her voice direct and piercing as a launched arrow, is a movement that puts the power to verify back in your hands. From rural parishes to the federal avenues, the crowd surged with renewed spirit. And on social platforms, another post trended, "Karoline is the flame that reveals." The tremors continued. New reports were released by watchdog organizations re-examining the foreign agreements and the financial networks surrounding post-presidential influence. Civic coalitions across the country launched events on ethical leadership inspired by Karoline's call. The hashtag #TruthFirst hashtag grew into a digital banner under which many now marched urging diligence, discernment, and verification. But with this awakening came friction. Progressive circles closed ranks around Obama, launching online campaigns defending his legacy. He built the bridge. She breaks it, one post read. Conversely, right-wing groups rallied louder than ever around Karoline, turning support into tribal allegiance, further deepening the divide. Meanwhile, Obama made a subdued appearance at a charity gathering in Laurel Heights. His gaze was far away, his tone measured as he answered questions. The interview was brief, but his expression told more, thoughtful, unshaken, and watching. Karoline has every right to pose questions, Obama said, reflecting on the aftermath of their debate. But her allegations miss the mark. My legacy is one of service guided by integrity, and I trust the public will recognize that. Applause rose from his audience. But on X, the reactions fractured sharply. Progressives rallied behind him, MAGA voices pushed back. Karoline, still standing on the stage in Stonefield, chose not to name him, but her reply was unmistakable. Her voice, low but fierce, spread like kindling catching fire. Integrity. True integrity doesn't hide in the shadows. It doesn't twist the truth when no one's looking. Behind her, the screen displayed a simple message, #TruthFirst. Americans demand transparency. This is your voice, she said, with quiet force, each word a pledge echoing through the square. We shape tomorrow by standing in truth today. She pressed forward, still ablaze with momentum, her voice threading conviction with clarity. In an age where distortion floods our feeds, everyday Americans are standing tall, verifying facts, questioning those in command. The crowd thundered in approval as the screen played familiar images, Karoline hosting grassroots sessions, communities proudly raising Truth First banners. We're not merely tearing down what's behind us, we are constructing a future lit by transparency, she said, her voice again like a litigator delivering a closing argument. The clip spread like wildfire, gathering millions of views across the globe, further entrenching Karoline's name in the annals of public discourse. She stood quietly for a beat, bathed in golden applause. Before her was a cross-section of the nation, rural hands, urban minds, classrooms, and battlegrounds, people who came not just to hear a speech, but to witness a turning point. This was the moment when politics no longer belonged to distant figures, but was reclaimed by the people it was meant to serve. We don't wait for transparency, she said again this time, her tone soft yet determined, not like a blade, but a bell rung in resolve. We forge it. Her words seemed etched in the descending dusk, echoing through city skylines and open plains, spiraling across the digital expanse. Footage from her address surged on every platform, translated and shared even by those who had long tuned out political dialogue. This was never just about Karoline Leavitt and Barack Obama. It was the struggle between memory and momentum, between preserving what was and daring to build anew. And, as in every functioning democracy, the pen for the next page remains not in the hands of the powerful, but in those of the people. The face-off between Karoline and Obama at the Civic Pulse Forum became a mirror of America's current moment, fractured, urgent, and undeniably hungry for truth. From charges of media manipulation and scrutiny over international agreements to questions about healthcare and presidential afterlives, the story touched nerves that run deep in American life. There's growing distrust in press institutions. Foreign affairs seem opaque. Healthcare costs remain burdensome. And whispers of unseen influence trouble many. Karoline's approach, wielding documentation, internal memos, and the investigative work of journalist Robert Huper and ex-staffer Elizabeth Rouse, spoke to a shifting tide. More and more, Americans are bypassing traditional gatekeepers, turning to independent verification and peer-shared information. The #TruthFirst initiative, with its town gatherings, digital campaigns, and signature banners waving through the heart of Stonefield, underscores one simple truth: united voices have power. And while social platforms echo with polarization, left proclaiming Obama as a progressive compass, right heralding Karoline as a warrior for reform, the lesson stands: verify what you hear. Don't drown in division. Rise in discernment. Take something from Karoline's path, lead with questions, ground them in evidence, and invite dialogue over dogma. Participate in local discussions. Trace claims back to their sources. Hold officials accountable not with fury, but with focus. And above all, resist the seduction of tribal politics. Let truth, not reaction, guide your civic compass. Just as Harper and Mitchell did, pursue what's real, even when it's difficult. Because it is in that pursuit that a just, open society begins to take root. If this message speaks to you, subscribe to our channel. Join us as we continue to shine light in dark corners, elevate civic truth, and build a future shaped by transparency. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and help carry the torch of #TruthFirst forward.